And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host Andrew Johnson. And Johnson, what an NCAA tournament this has been so far. We are now down to the final 16 teams in this year's college basketball season. This upcoming Thursday and Friday, we will have the Sweet 16. It will then lead us into Saturday and Sunday, which will be the Elite Eight. And by the time we record next week here on the show, we will have the Final Four for this year's college basketball season.
So we're getting word that this is an anticlimactic first and second round, saying that Cinderellas are dead and NIL killed the sport. But I'm going to make the argument that the sport is well and alive throughout the show here. But Nick, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment about that. It sucks that there isn't really a true Cinderella going into the Sweet 16. There have been a couple of upsets that we've seen over the time period, but there have been so many incredible moments we've had from this NCAA tournament. A couple of buzzer beaters, last second shots, last second almost shots. That's one game in particular. And you've had just some really good competitive basketball from a lot of these teams. But yeah, let's get things started. Let's start off with the slate that happened on Thursday. Some of the notable games, what we'll do tonight is we're gonna mention the scores of each games from the first and second round. We'll be giving a little bit of, in analysis, I would say, about certain games that happened during the week for the first and second round. In the first round, we started off on Thursday. We have a couple of notable games. You have, I guess, what we'll do is we'll start off with the games that were pretty much out of reach for certain teams. Michigan was up 4 at halftime against Howard, a little bit scary for the Wolverines, but monster second half. They win by 21 points to move on. Houston dominates Idaho. Michigan State dominated North Dakota State. Illinois dominating Penn. We saw Nebraska getting their first ever NCAA tournament victory, defeating Troy. That did not go well for me in my upset prediction from our show last week. Darius Acuff and company for Arkansas doing the job beating Hawaii. We also saw Vanderbilt holding on to beat McNeese at the last second. 10-point win for them. It was back and forth at the first half. Texas A&M dominated St. Mary's. St. Mary's really just got ran out of the gym in that game. How about St. Louis? They blew out Georgia. That game was just not competitive whatsoever. Great win for the Billikens in that matchup. But some of the big games that we had that were closer on the Thursday slate, we start off, I think, with Duke probably having the scariest, outcome possible for them, as they were down double digits to 16 seed Siena going into halftime of that game. We mentioned, that Duke is dealing with injuries right now. That definitely played a factor into this game. But Siena not really making a lot of adjustments and substitutions in the second half led Duke to come from behind and beat the Siena 71 to 65. They advanced to the second round of the NCAA tournament. A big scare for the Blue Devils in that matchup. Gonzaga beating Kennesaw State by 9 points. That was a little bit close for comfort for the Bulldogs, but they were able to hold on. We saw Louisville pretty much were rolling against South Florida till the very end of that game. The Bulls made it interesting, but Louisville held on 83 to 79. How about Texas after winning a very close first four game against NC State? They knock off BYU 79-71. Despite AJ DeBantis' 35 points and 10 rebounds, BYU is one and done in the NCAA tournament. TCU was up big in Ohio State going into halftime of their game. That game came down to the wire as TCU really struggled in the second half, but the Horned Frost get a last-second bucket to hang on 66-64 over Ohio State. And then I think the most two notable games that really were standouts on that day, Johnson, you had the upset of VCU and North Carolina in a game where North Carolina was up 19 points at one point in the second half. I think they're up 14 with 7 minutes left. VCU able to force overtime in that game, able to win the game in overtime 82 to 78. There have been questions on what the status of Hubert Davis is going to be for North Carolina in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens for the Tar Heels. And the other upset that we had was High Point knocking off Wisconsin 83-82. Chase McJohnston, one of the biggest stories going into this tournament. A lot of people calling him maybe the next Jack Golke, of course, the former player from Oakland a couple years ago when they knocked off Kentucky. Had only been shooting 3 pointers this entire season. I think he only shot 4 2-point field goals the entire year. And of course, Johnson, how fitting that the game-winning basket of this game for High Point is a 2-point basket for Chase Johnson on a fast break layup. High Point pulls off the 12-5 upset, 83-82, rounding out day one's coverage of the NCAA tournament. What stood out to you from day one?
I want to talk about that High Point upset, the 5 over the 12, and I'm going to go in a little bit into the analytics here because that's really the only true upset we had on day one, right? I know
Yeah.
9 over 8 is technically an upset, but if you take a look at the analytics, St. Louis was so far ahead of Georgia. That's not a true upset, and the betting
I
markets
think
had
just
it
the
that way
way
too.
they won was really
It was definitely
surprising.
shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the analytics was said that St. Louis is a better team than Georgia going in that game, so it's not really a true upset. I want to talk about the way teams are seeded nowadays, right? And just the difference of why we used to get upsets back in the early 2000s and really up until, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago. College basketball was one of the last holdovers to kind of take analytics, right? Because the NBA started in that 3 point revolution in the mid 2010s, led by Steph Curry, and a lot of their coaching staffs kind of adapted that and they started using it. But we didn't start ranking these teams properly up until the last couple of years. Analytics were a foreign land in college basketball. Again, some of the top teams were using it, but the committee certainly wasn't using it. I want to take it back to 2012, 2013, right? Where Rick Pitino's Louisville Cardinals won the national championship. So you're with me, Nick?
I know exactly what you're getting at here. I think I heard the stat earlier.
That's not the stat about the 3 point shooting. This is
Oh.
completely different that I've gone through and I've looked.
Oh, okay.
If you
Okay,
want to
go
take
on.
a look at KenPom, which is considered to be the gold standard of advanced analytics for college basketball, the number one overall seed should have been Louisville, and it was. They won the national championship. They got it right. But if you take a look at that 1 to 10, it gets wild, Nick. Uh, according to again, this is all according to KenPom analytics, and you could see where these teams kind of went in the tournament. I want to talk about Georgetown, which was a number 2 seed, right? And they were considered to be one of the cream of the crop teams in the Big East, right? So most people had them as like the 5th or 6th overall seed, right?
Right.
According to KenPom, they were 16, Nick.
Hmm.
KenPom, they easily could have been a 5 seed, right? And then if you take a look at Florida Gulf Coast, who was a 15 seed at the time, 105 in KenPom. So that really could have been a 5-12 matchup, right?
Right.
It really could have. And people say, oh, well, 5-12 upset happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, that's a 5-12 upset in other world, in like in other sense. I want to take a look at Oregon too, right, Nick? Oregon had a hell of a run that year. They made the Sweet 16, losing to Rick Pitino's Louisville Cardinals in the Midwest Regional Semifinal by a score of 77-69. And that was 1 versus 12. But how did Oregon get there? Well, if you take a look what Oregon did that year, they had the number 12 overall seed. They were 25-8, I believe, going into the tournament. They had an NBA talent in Damian Dotson. And they beat handily Oklahoma in the first round, 68-55, and St. Louis easily 74-57 in the second round, and had a very close game with the Cardinals. They really made it a game towards the end there. But, Nick, would you want to take a guess on what Oregon was in the KenPom that year?
Like 62 maybe?
35.
I
Oregon should have been maybe an 8 seed. And they could do this all day with these different teams. Creighton that year had better analytics than Georgetown. Creighton was a 7 seed. There's actually multiple teams. Pittsburgh, 11th in KenPom, 8 overall, 8th seed. It was an 8 seed. Minnesota, 20th in KenPom, 11th seed. So you could do this all day long, and you kind of get ridiculous too. Because if you take a look at the at-large Knicks in this modern era, you have to take a look at who's getting an at-large bid. You have teams well into the 50s getting 9 seeds, like Villanova, 53 overall. That would never happen nowadays. You'd say 53 KenPom, you're outside the bubble. That's it. So the reason why we're getting less and less upsets, yes, the NIL may be contributing, but the real answer to this is that no one's looking at is this better matchmaking. If these teams are matched up analytically better, you're gonna get fewer upsets. That's my 2 cents on it, Nick.
Yeah, and the High Point coach even made a comment about the you know talking about the team's resume. He even brought up Miami, Ohio, who of course was the talk of the one of the biggest talks of the entire college basketball season in terms of should they make it or should they not. High Point obviously made it because they won their conference tournament, but yeah, I know everyone loves to see the Cinderella upsets. I've certainly have loved to see that the last however many years. A couple 16 being one, we've seen 15s over two, so on and so forth. But you also, at the same time, you're seeing a lot of these teams. Like for example, Kentucky, who we're talking about a little bit as well. Like they're a team that has like maybe $20 million or something they're spending on college basketball for the upcoming like this past season. It's like it's gonna come down to the point that NIL is gonna play a factor, yes, but that what you mentioned with all the metrics and stuff like that, that's also playing a factor too. You have a lot of strong teams in each one of their respective conferences now. Obviously, the conference realignment I think is also playing a factor into that as well because you're just seeing a lot of big time competition and you're seeing a lot of these guys, obviously now with the transfer portal and everything, everyone's either you're not really seeing a team staying together for 4 years. Like I think Purdue might be the only realistic team that has a team like
You
that.
might have Marquette in a year next year coming up. They're going to retain a lot of
Right.
guys, and Nigel James is going to make a big jump. So you're going to see, I think, a lot of teams going forward. It's going to become more and more common, especially as that money dries up, and they're going to have to commit money to football and baseball and
Right.
other sports. So this is like maybe you have one more year of this, but it's not going to be to this extent where you can have mercenaries every single year.
Yeah, it's a weird year. I mean, it's funny because like years ago, everybody wanted like a quote unquote chalk tournament because whenever you're making a bracket, you want the big teams to win. But then, when the Cinderellas happen, sometimes some people are ecstatic that it's happening. Some people are pissed off because they want to see good high tier competition. 2023 feels like an anomaly right now where you had, the San Diego States, the Florida Atlantics, teams like that.
UConn is a 5 seed.
Yeah, like in the Final Four. Like that feels like a lifetime ago, and that was just a few seasons ago.
I also want to point out one thing about High Point, Nick.
Yeah.
High Point is finishing 75. Well, they finished 75 the next because it stopped updating on March 15th. Uh, Wisconsin that year had losses to Oregon and USC, one at home, one away, both low in the Ken Pompton High Point. So
Right.
not that crazy because analytically speaking, Oregon had multiple losses to teams worse than them this year. So is that really surprising?
No, I mean, I even gave you like and a lot of our friends a close warning about this High Point team because this is a team that can score at will. They proved it also in their second round matchup. We'll talk about that later against Arkansas. This is a team that they're a team that can score. They're not really. I don't think they should have been a team that was kept under the rug. They were a really solid team this season, and obviously they were the biggest upset of the entire tournament because as I mentioned, also I think what was it maybe 2 weeks ago when we did our conference tournament preview, Wisconsin was having a strong season. They were a team that was being you know kept as a dark horse in the Big Ten. You had strong players like Blackwell, Nick Boyd, and yeah, I mean they just collapsed towards the end of that game. They really just were not able to make shots towards the end. They couldn't stop the perimeter outside shooting of High Point, and yeah, they pretty much slept on them. Unfortunately, they were looking ahead to potential matchup with Arkansas
Wisconsin go
second
since
round.
Wisconsin over the last 2 weeks of the season since they entered March, which was conference tournaments and the last couple games of the regular season. Wisconsin was playing like the 10th best team in the nation too.
Right.
So Wisconsin had a lot of steam going into it. But High Point, this is gonna sound crazy, Nick. High Point was playing at the same level as Kansas since the beginning of March.
Yeah.
According to Bart Torvik, Kansas was 61, High Point 64, and including that first round, which I don't think you've talked about, Nick, though. And this is gonna be really interesting because we haven't spoken about Duke Siena yet, which Siena State's almost had them on the ropes.
Right there, yeah, we
Siena, the 16th, one of the lowest overall seeds, 65 in the beginning of since the beginning of March, and Duke playing as the 10th best team. So that was 10 versus 6, I'm sorry, 6 versus 65. So it listen, a lot of these teams get hot towards the end of it. Cal Baptist was playing better than Kansas towards the end of the season, just in the month of March. So
right.
Cal Baptist, they almost beat Kansas too. It
That's
was
why
late in the game.
I liked them in that first round. They just came out of the gate, slow. Then that cost them.
Yeah, and listen, a lot of these teams are playing better. Like VCU playing better than North Carolina. Is that a real upset when that happens? On paper, sure it is, sure. But when you take a look how these teams end the season, especially in crunch time,
Yeah, I think if Caleb Wilson was playing that game, I don't see a reason
of
why
course,
North
of
Carolina does
course.
not lose that game. But there's no excuse blowing a 19-point second half lead. Like it's just inexcusable because remember that was pretty much similar to what happened when they played Kansas in the national championship a couple years ago too. The same exact thing happened. Double-digit lead at halftime, dominating the game, and they just choked.
So
So,
Nick, let's talk about day 2 of the NCAA tournament. What went on? Tell me.
so day two was a little bit different than day one. Day one I felt like there was a lot more closer games. Day two was a little bit more towards blowout territory. I think the biggest standout of the day was obviously the Santa Clara Kentucky game. Um, Santa Clara hits the 3-pointer with Graves, where I think what was it, 2.3 seconds left on the
Yep.
clock.
And then he comes.
Uh,
They run
Ortega,
straight down the court.
yeah, Ortega away goes to half court and shoots a buzzer beater, sends the game to overtime. Kentucky goes on to win it in overtime, 89-84. By far the wildest game, if not the wildest game, one of the wildest games in the first round of this tournament. The other matches we saw, Arizona and Florida take care of business. Florida almost winning by 60 in their matchup in the first round. Iowa State took care of business. Purdue took care of business. We've seen Terrence Reed Jr. play Johnson in person, but 31 rebounds, 27 rebounds, unheard of at this point at the collegiate level. He did that against Furman in their first round matchup. We saw Virginia, a little bit of a scare against Wright State. They go on to win 82-73. Bama, after a scare in the first half, went on to beat Hofstra 90-70. Kansas, same exact situation. They were up big going into halftime. Cal Baptist rallied late, but it was not enough. They lose 68-60 to the Jayhawks. Texas Tech was in a battle with Akron in the first half, and they scored 51 points in the second half and win by 20. I think they shot like 63% from the field in that game. Of course, for us, St. John's rolling past Northern Iowa 79-53. Tennessee ending the Miami, Ohio season rolling past them 78-56. UCLA being UCF 75-71. Incredible that UCF even made that a game because they were just getting beat up in that one against the Bruins. Miami beats Missouri despite being on the quote-unquote road for that game, 80-66 after a strong second half. And we see Iowa beat Clemson in what was a low-scoring game, which was to be expected. And Utah State gets past Villanova 86-76 to round out the first round matchups for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of these games. I want to talk about first game I want to talk about is Akron and Texas Tech because Texas Tech, a 5 seed. Again, this is all Bart Torvik. Since the beginning of March, Texas Tech has been playing like the 72nd best team in the country.
Right.
Their offense is 156 and their defense is 61, ranked in the country. So there's 155 better teams on offense and 60 teams better on defense. Akron was playing like the 103rd best team. So a gap like that, you expect them to kind of win and dominate, but an upset could happen. But what I want to talk about again, Nick, is some of these other teams that had these close games, right? Like we take a look at Kentucky, Santa Clara. On paper, Kentucky should dominate that, right?
Right.
Kentucky playing like the 40th best team, Santa Clara not so much. If you take a look again, Bart Torvik, Santa Clara is playing like the 32nd best team. So that's why a lot of teams picked Santa Clara. If it wasn't for that miraculous buzzer beater, not going in overtime, Santa Clara was going to move on. One thing I didn't touch upon, South Florida 28, Louisville 22. It came down really close in the end. If South Florida probably played any other six seed in the country, they would have had a better shot. They could have been even if they put with a 12th or a 13th seed, they would have had a better shot. If they had played, for example, God forbid, if they had played St. John's, they would have had a legitimate chance of winning that game. They would have played Wisconsin. I'm sure they would have beaten them. So a lot of this seeding, it's great, but I think the committee needs to take a look at the last 2 weeks because Nick, let's talk about the second week, the second
Second
set
round.
of games now. So let's talk about the second round. And I want to start off with one of the biggest upsets. I know it didn't happen on the first day, but Florida loses in the second round to Iowa.
Well, do you want to get to the Saturday slate first before we do the Sunday slate?
Oh, sure. Let's talk about Saturday. I
Yeah,
can wait.
I'll go through. I'll go through it quickly. Because there were a couple blowouts on Saturday. I think the biggest standout from Saturday were two games in particular. Texas upsets Gonzaga 74-68. From the first four to now the Sweet 16 for the Longhorns.
By the way, Nick, Gonzaga, again, Ken Bartovic, Gonzaga playing like the 36th best team in the country. Are you really that surprised they got upset?
No, not. You and I both said it. BYU was in that spot that they would probably beat Gonzaga.
Yeah,
But it was
but
Texas that got the benefit of the factor in that matchup. Um, so that happens. Texas goes on to the Sweet 16. We'll preview their matchup in a little bit. Probably I think for me, the one of the best games we had in the second round was that Vanderbilt Nebraska game. Obviously, those two teams at one point were both ranked in the top 10. They were both undefeated to start the season, and a little bit of a mental lapse throughout the second half of the season for them. But the 5-4 matchup in that South region came down to the wire. Nebraska takes a lead with I don't remember the exact time period. Might have been like 2 or 3 seconds left on the clock. I unfortunately had Vanderbilt in this game, and Tanner I don't know if you remember this also, almost had basically had a similar situation earlier in the year against Missouri, where he had a half court heave, it rolled out of the rim. They lost that game to Missouri. Pretty much the exact same thing happens in this game against Nebraska. The ball hit pretty much every single part of the rim on the shot. It rolls out. Nebraska not only wins their first NCAA tournament game, they win their second NCAA tournament game. They're moving on to the Sweet 16 for the first time ever, and what was an incredible matchup between those two teams. Some of the other matchups, Arkansas beats High Point in a very high scoring game. High Point tried their best, but just Darius Acup for 36 points. No chance they were going to be able to beat the Razorbacks on that matchup. Illinois gets past VCU easily, 76-55. Michigan State gets a big game from Carr, 21 points, 10 rebounds. They knock off Louisville. Houston just rolls past Texas A&M. That was not even a contest in the South region. Duke was close with TCU going into the second half. I think it was 40-40 with about 16 minutes left. And Duke just dominates them 81-58. A monster game for Boozer and company. They look like the Duke team that we had seen for the majority of the season. And Michigan, after a somewhat back and forth first half between St. Louis, they rolled past them in the second half, 95-72. That concludes the Saturday matchups for the second round. Anything there you want to touch upon before I talk about the Sunday matchups?
You can go straight into Sunday, Nick.
All right, so I know you want to talk about this Iowa Florida game. I'll bring it to you first. Obviously, Iowa leading for a majority of this game. It was 11-8 Florida early. Iowa led that game for the remainder of the first half. Going into the second half, Florida down double-digit points at one point in the second half, able to come back and take the lead. But Florida were able to get the lead late in that and that's almost a fourth quarter, late in the second half. Iowa goes up the court. They get the open three look because Florida. I don't know if this is where you're going to go with your debate about it. For some reason, they go for a press defense on this spot where they're up 2 points, and because of them going press, Iowa goes quickly up. They find an open three on the outside corner. They get the three with about 4 seconds left. Florida has a chance to win it at the end, but not able to get a shot off. And Iowa pulls off what a lot of people thought to probably outside the High Point upset, probably the second biggest upset of the entire tournament. They knock off the defending national
I love
champion
that you said that, Nick,
73
because
72.
since March 1st, what do you think Florida's been playing like relative to the other teams in the country? What do you think Iowa's been playing with? Rank in the country, according to Bart Torvik.
If I
Uh,
had to guess for
what
Florida, it's got to be like six, maybe. Is it that high?
15?
15? Really?
There
I know
are
the Vanderbilt
14.
game
There are
probably.
14 better teams, including Vanderbilt, that have been playing better than Florida since March 1st. And
Yeah,
now take a stab at what Iowa is.
Iowa's got to be. Whew, I'm gonna guess 55.
20.
They're that high?
Exactly. And that's why it's very surprising that since the end of the season, since the beginning of March, there's data through these games. Iowa's been playing way almost equivalent to Florida. Florida's
Really?
playing like a low 4 seed, and Iowa's playing like a low 5 seed. So in a 4-5 matchup, Nick, is it that's shocking that it was this close and it was really a coin flip? If that's the information you had prior to this, if you took the numbers away that the committee gave them and you judged them how they've been playing for the last 2 weeks, because remember, March about is who is hot at the end of the season. Your resume is what you did in November and December, but March is about what you've done lately.
Right.
And what Florida's done lately is they haven't played that well, and Iowa has taken it to a next level. So if I told you, Nick, that this was a with no prior mention, if this was a 4-5 game, would you say, "Oh well, that's not that shocking"? Because according to the analytics, that's what it was.
Right.
This was a 4-5 game.
And look at what Iowa was doing prior to that happening. They had losses to some of the worst teams in the Big Ten, teams like Maryland, Penn State. Like they weren't beating, like they were having some really bad performances. Um, Split meetings with Nebraska. They beat Ohio State, or I should say they split with Ohio State. They weren't really playing good going into this tournament, and even in the Big Ten tournament, they didn't. Obviously, they went one and done. They lose to Ohio State, but yeah, that's. I would not have guessed 20. I would have thought maybe at the highest like maybe the 40s because they were, you know, they were staying the course. I felt like and were, obviously going to make the tournament, but not like in a way where they would beat Florida because Florida,
No,
like
they've been very good to end the
right,
season. They've been very good.
Florida wasn't my pick in this region. I figured they would get to the Sweet 16. Obviously, the Vanderbilt game was a big outlier because they lost by 20. They got dominated in that game. And they had close calls throughout the end of the season. They just got through those games towards the end. So if not given the stats, I am surprised. Had I been given those stats, I guess you can't really fully be surprised by it. But yeah, without knowing the stats, this was a very big surpriser for me. I did not expect the Hawkeyes to pull this one off.
No, and that's what I wanted to kind of touch about because when you're making your picks now for this weekend, if you can be making bets on this, you got to take a look at this kind of stuff because
Yeah.
it tells a story. Nick, please recap the rest of the day, please. You
I
got
think
a lot of big games.
I think we'll save our game for last because that one was something else for the two of us and that day. Um, I'll go through some of the ones that were maybe a little bit out of hand. Bama rolls past Texas Tech. They just shot the lights out in that game.
By the way, Texas Tech, like I mentioned before, playing like the 73rd best team in the
Yeah.
country. Are you that surprised?
No, I mean once JT Tomlin got injured, you knew they were not.
Alabama
Yeah.
playing like the 18th best team in the country. So that
Yeah.
score, not surprising. Even though 4-5 should be a coin flip, that's like a 4 seed playing a like an 18 seed. So
Right. So Florida moves on. They'll be in the Sweet 16. They will take on Michigan in that Sweet 16. We saw UConn get past UCLA. That was a bit of a back and forth game in the first half. UConn pulled away in the second half at one point. UCLA would make a run, but they would not have any chance. Caravan, 27 points in that game. UConn goes on to the Sweet 16. They'll take on Michigan State. A little bit of a scare for Arizona in their game against Utah State. They were looking like they were going to blow them out. And the Aggies made that one very interesting in the second half. Arizona pulled away late. They move on to the Sweet 16, take on Arkansas, which is probably my favorite matchup of the entire Sweet 16 going in to the second weekend of this tournament. Purdue knocks off Miami 79-69 in their matchup. They now will take on Texas in the Sweet 16, certainly a matchup I don't think anyone expected in that one. Iowa State rolls past Kentucky. That was not surprising to me. It was a close game in the first half, but Iowa State just dominated them in the second half easily, 82 to
5 away,
63.
Nick. Taking a look at the analytics. Hate to be this guy. Kentucky playing like the 40th best team in the country, so quasi 9 seed, 10 seed, and Iowa State number 1 team in the country. So
Yeah, and you and I think you and I both said it going into the tournament. They played really strong in the Big 12 tournament, and they only lost it on a buzzer beater to Arizona, and we, and I think that's something that makes sense because they were playing really good basketball. Obviously, they lose Jefferson, who was a second team All American, but they're still a strong team outside of him. Now they definitely could use him the rest of the way, but I'm not so sure if they will get him the rest of the way of this NCAA tournament. We'll have to see what happens going into the next couple of days. Tennessee knocks off Virginia 79 to 72. The Volunteers with a big time. I don't know if you want to call it an upset. It was a close spread going into that matchup, regardless. But
Tennessee, yeah, no. According to the analytics, it wouldn't even be close.
yeah,
I mean, it's a little close. Tennessee was the better team going into that.
yeah,
Tennessee playing like a 4, Virginia playing like a 6. So
yeah, yeah. Rick Barnes makes another Sweet 16. He continues that trend for him. I'm trying to think of. I think that leaves then the St. John's game with Kansas that's left on the Sweet 16 docket. What a game this was! It was an ugly first half for both offenses in this game. Um, St. John's giving Kansas a lot of fits on inbounding, and they just really were having trouble through the majority of that first half. It got better for the Jayhawks in the second half in that matchup. St. John's had shot maybe the most 3-pointers in a game that they had all season. I don't remember them shooting over 33s in one game. But they get big contributions from Bryce Hopkins, Zuby Ejiofor doing what he does best. But Kansas was able to come back from a 14-point second half deficit to tie the game late with about 13 seconds left. Kansas, having only 2 fouls at that point says, you know what, let's just keep fouling and try to force a turnover in the front court or the back court. That way we can try to maybe get another basket and win the game. They were not able to do it. So with 3.9 seconds left, St. John's is about at half court. They get the ball. They give the ball to Dylan Darling, who at that point, 0 for 4 in the game, hadn't had a single point in the game. He tells Rick Pitino, listen, give me the ball. We don't have much time left. We got to run a quick play to try to get the game winner. He goes up the court. Kansas just has a mental lapse in the defense. Darling gets the game-winning buzzer beater. St. John's in the Sweet 16 Johnson for the first time since 1999 with a thrilling win over Kansas 67 to 65.
I do want to point out that St. John's is playing like the 3rd best team in the country, and Kansas is playing like the 40th best team in the country, as I mentioned before. To be exact, it's like I think it's 61 actually, and it did look like that for the majority of the second half. But the power of officiating and St. John's, again with the analytics, top 25 team in the nation at drawing fouls all year, and of course going into this. So when it comes to going to the free throw line, a top 25 team all year, including down the stretch. And Kansas had 2 fouls in the last 19 and a half minutes of a game. St. John's had way more than them. I think they had 9 fouls or 8 fouls.
Well, yeah, they were in the single bonus by the time that game ended. Or were they?
Yeah,
No, they might have been the double. They were in the double, I think.
Yeah, so absolute insanity of that. And then the refs with some egregious calls. A goaltend that was clear as day did not get overturned.
Yeah.
You had a deflected ball that got called for an over and back. And then you had a ball that clearly was out of bounds, and they throw it straight in, and they get a layup.
Right.
That's 6 points right there.
And was it
St.
because
John's
the ball...
begin to...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go please, go ahead.
I was going to say, was that because the player was out of bounds or because the ball was out of bounds?
The player was out of bounds.
The player was out of bounds.
And then he pushed it outward. He was
That's what I thought.
The referee on the baseline was staring straight at him, and
Right.
they did not blow a whistle.
Yeah,
So,
they got caught in the
refs do not have the ability
mystique, I guess,
to influence 15 points in a game, but they do have. And Tim Donahue has said this, who's famous for rigging games.
Well,
They can call up to 7-8 points, And that's where 7 or 8 points really came from.
Right.
So if St. John's had a mini collapse, which they definitely were not playing their best, and the final score should have been something, let's say 65-57 or 67, 59, that's what it should have been. But it should have never come down to that. And I think the officiating is something to be improved upon, to say the least. And when you have unbiased commentators like Kevin Harlan calling out the officiating in real time, you know it's bad.
Well, Kevin Harlan's one of the greats.
He is one of the great, and
Having to deal with Stan Van Gundy is
Stan Van Gundy should be sticking to coaching. That's all I will say.
yeah. Jeff was obviously the better commentator.
Yes, by far.
I miss someone on. I know I'll get it all the time
On ESPN. Yeah.
ESE. That the trio of him, Mark Jackson, and Mike Breen.
Maybe we're biased because we're New Yorkers, but no, I think it's even from a national perspective, they were the best commentary team.
You can ask anyone that's not even a New Yorker. Like, they will say the exact same thing. It's not even close. I couldn't even tell you who's doing it now. Like, I have no idea what they're.
I think they're taking Doris Burke off of it. I think I do.
I don't think she's on it anymore.
Yeah, so that I do know. I mean,
I don't even know who Mike Breen's partner is. It Richard Jefferson?
I really don't know. I watched the local broadcast. That's why.
Yeah, it's gotten so bad. I miss those days. Like, it was just such a good like chemistry they had. But anyway, getting off topic. Yeah, this was a wild game. My heart rate was through the roof even hours after this game ended. Not good for my mental health. But yeah, I mean, you and I had to watch a lot of bad years for this team, and the fact that now they're in the Sweet 16, it definitely feels gratifying. But obviously, the job's not finished. We would like to get a little bit more if possible.
Yeah, and anyone that listens said last year that we did not feel good about that Arkansas game when the bracket was released, but the exact opposite reaction this year, that we did feel good about this Kansas game, and our initial gut reactions were proved to be true for both years.
It's funny because I think I might have said it when the bracket initially came out to you off the air. I said I like our chances this year more than last year.
Yeah, because last even though we're playing Duke, because
if you got past Arkansas, you had to play Texas Tech immediately right after. Texas Tech was a strong team that season, and Duke is a weird one seed. That yes, they are good,
but they're injured,
but they're hurt. They might get Caleb Foster back maybe for this game on Friday, but they're not playing great right now. Like they're really struggling without him right at the current moment. And then if you get past them, it's either Michigan State or UConn. You've obviously played 3 games against UConn this season. And Michigan State is a solid team. So that would be a great matchup with Izzo and Pitino if that were to happen in the Elite Eight. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. We still have to get past potentially Duke on Friday in that matchup. And I guess, Johnson, speaking about those Sweet 16 matchups, I think let's go in to the matchups for the Sweet 16 this upcoming week, second week of the NCAA tournament. Felt weird waking up today and not having any college basketball going down. I always hate this time of the day, when the tournament's going around, the Monday after the first weekend.
However, because my team's in, I'm happy that Rick Pitino's going to get 5 days rest and the game plan versus Duke. Need it. Rick Pitino with 5 days to game plan against Duke is going to be something special.
They're definitely going to need it. It's going to be a great matchup on Friday. So let's start off with the matchups on Thursday, Johnson. We have the lines for these games. Some interesting matchups on Thursday, to say the least. The first matchup of the Thursday slate, the 11th-seeded Texas Longhorns taking on the 2-seed Big Ten champion Purdue Boilermakers. Texas from first forward and out of the Sweet 16, as I mentioned. Purdue try to avoid what would be another upset over how many years now of upsets for this team. They are a 6.5-point favorite, that being the Boilermakers. The over-under 148.5.
So I'm going to start off by saying the strategy I'm taking with the Sweet 16 is, even though I have my emotional picks on who I want to win, I'm going to look at the analytics too. So this is what I'm going to start with first. I'm taking Purdue plus 6.5, minus 6.5, over Texas Tech, because the analytics say that Purdue is favored by such a wide margin that this line is a joke. Purdue should absolutely steamroll Texas. Shouldn't even be close.
I'm with you. I think Texas has gotten the benefit of, facing a BYU team that it's just AJ DeBonsa and that's it. And then a Gonzaga team that had not really been have been good, but good in their conference, not because they've been good throughout the rest of the season. They just taken a better factor of playing in that conference. That's something that I've been trying to harp on for you for years now with Gonzaga, but
No, but they've had some very good teams in the past. This the last two or three
I'm
years
aware.
have been rough.
I'm aware. I'm aware. But yeah, that's besides the point. That's also getting off topic. I'll take Purdue as well in that matchup to get the job done and move on to the Elite Eight. They would take on either Arkansas or Arizona if they move on. And we'll break down that matchup in just a few short moments. Before we get into that one, Johnson, how about this game? This certainly was the game that everybody had in their Sweet 16 bracket. I'm sure there was no way no one didn't have this matchup.
A corn bowl. You
Nine
have number.
seeded Iowa, 4 seeded Nebraska. Much break
Uh,
down the lines.
yeah, it's Nebraska minus 1.5, and so they're the favorite. 133.5 is the over under. Don't be stupid here. Take Iowa plus 1.5. They're playing like one of the top teams in the country, and no disrespect to Nebraska, but I'm surprised Iowa's not favored this game.
Uh, my football brain immediately goes into this matchup thinking how many punts are going to be in this matchup because you see it so many times with
Well,
these
if
two
you count
teams.
turnovers as punts, maybe like 25.
There might be. It is a very low over under, 133.5. They are expecting a low scoring matchup. My problem, Johnson, I know you just brought those metrics with Iowa. Nebraska, for some reason, is just. I listen. I'll admit. I'll I'll admit it. Last week or whatever it was, 2 weeks ago maybe, I said I was not a fan of this team. I said that I would not be surprised if they're one and done. Obviously, my first big upset I had in the tournament was Troy over Nebraska, and then Nebraska proceeded to beat them by 30 points. Then they beat Vanderbilt in another game where I thought Vanderbilt would probably win easily. Nebraska has proven me wrong so far. They have made me eat my words. They can shoot at will. This is a team that is very scary to shoot with. It's a feel good story. I'm gonna just keep it rolling right now. I think the beauty of this matchup, obviously with them being both in the Big Ten, obviously, if you look at the two matches they've had this season, Johnson, they have been very close matchups between the two teams. Iowa beat them first at home. That was a 57-52 win for the Hawkeyes. And then the second matchup was the second to last game season of the year for Nebraska and Iowa. Nebraska wins that game in overtime 84-75. So they've had some thrilling matchups so far this season. But I'll take the Cornhuskers to move on to their first ever Elite Eight going into this upcoming weekend. How about this next game? This is my favorite game of the week. 4 seed Arkansas, number 1 seed Arizona. Arizona, a 7.5 point favorite, 167.5 the over under.
Yeah, my heart wants to say Arkansas is going to win this game because I have them winning by region, but the analytics say Arizona minus 7.5 because they were playing as one of the best teams in the country. So Arizona minus 7.5 for me.
I'm going to go with the over in this game. The 7.5 is tricky. Arkansas just is not a good defensive team. I think if there's a reason why you should like the spread, it's because Arkansas can't play defense. But I think for me, taking the spread's so tough because Darius Acuff is just incredible. But this Arizona team is also incredible. This is a really strong matchup. I think regardless of who wins this matchup, this team will go to the Final Four. But as I mentioned, Arizona is my national champion pick. I'll take the over in this game for these two teams. Should be a really, really fun matchup on Thursday. What's the final game on Thursday?
We've got number 3 Illinois versus number 2 Houston. Houston is a 3.5 point favorite, and 139.5 is the over under. Analytics say that Illinois is going to keep this close with Houston, so I'm inclined to believe that. So Illinois plus 3.5.
I'm gonna go with only Houston just because of this being a home game for them. I think maybe that will play a factor into this one. Um, it's kind of worked out for these two teams, Johnson. I feel like because the winner of this game, you would think, should get past their next matchup in Iowa and Nebraska. It should get to the Final Four. Could be completely wrong. Maybe I'm just a fool, but it's worked out for these two teams. Obviously, it's crazy to think that this one region, it's 4 teams left. 3 of them are from the Big Ten. and Houston. But I'll take the outlier Houston to cover the 3.5 in that matchup to round out the Thursday slate for the Sweet 16. Then let's go into the Friday slate. How about their first game? Might as well get into our game, Johnson. It is St. John's, the 5 seed, Duke, the number 1 seed. Duke, 6.5 point favorite, 142.5 the over under.
So in the last 7 games that these teams have played, these teams are both 7-0. But despite that, Duke is missing Caleb Foster and they're playing as the number 6 team in the country, while the Red Storm are playing as the number 3 team in the country. I'm not saying this is going to be a walk in the park for either team by any means necessary, but the analytics are begging me to take St. John's to cover. So St. John's plus 6.5. It's going to be a close game. It's going to come down to ref ball. St. John's has the number 2 defense in the country since the start of March, and they have a top 25 offense. So I'm bound to believe they're going to keep it close.
Yeah, I'm in a weird roads because I want to pick them too.
I give them a 35% chance of winning outright. So I think 6.5 is an easy pick for me.
Yeah, I could be talked into 40%. I really think they have a good shot in this game. The physicality,
it would not shock me at all if they won it.
No, if you ask any basketball expert, they are saying the same thing right now. They would not be surprised if St. John's wins this game. They've been one of the hottest teams in the country the last 2 months of the season. Was it 19 to 20 or
they've won 21 out of the last 22 games now.
21 out of 22. I'll take them to cover the 6.5. I know I didn't want to go for the full motion on that one, but it just comes down to, they need to be physical in this game. You and I both said it off the air, of course. They can't shoot like they did against Kansas because they really got away with that in that game. They shot under 40%. Kansas shot near 45% for that game, and they still won the game. That came down to turnovers and second chance opportunities. That's been a key for this team for a couple years now since Rick Pitino took over the helm. They have to just avoid a really slow shooting night. If they can get anything remotely close to what Bryce Hopkins did on Sunday, and he gets another big game like that, they really could do this and pull off the upset. So I'll take them to cover the 6.5.
All right, the next game we got here is number 4 Alabama versus number 1 Michigan. Michigan is a 10.5-point favorite. 174.5 is the over/under. And despite me wanting to pick against Rico Bosco's team, I will pick that Alabama keeps it close at plus 10.5. So give me Alabama plus 10.5. Again, they're playing like the 18th best team in the country. Michigan is playing as the 13th best team in the country. This is telling me that I should really take Alabama here to at least cover.
10.5 is a lot of points.
It's a lot of points for
a lot of points.
But Alabama, I've seen them score 10 and a half to 11 points in 90 seconds multiple times throughout the season. So,
yes, they lose Aiden Holloway before the tournament.
I don't think they're going to win, but I think they're
covering. No, Michigan should win this game. My problem is I feel like Michigan wins this game by 8 points, and that's enough. It's so, you know what? I initially was going to say Michigan 10.5. I can't even be talking to it. I'm going to take the over. And I know it's crazy because it's 174 points. I'll just take the over. Michigan's a really strong scoring team. Bama, all they really can do is score. Their defense isn't great. They only looked good last night because Texas Tech just shot horribly. Michigan's not going to do that in this game. So I'll take the over between these two teams. Next matchup. In the East region is the number 3 seeded Michigan State Spartans, the number 2 seeded UConn Huskies. UConn 2.5-point favorite, 136.5 is the over/under.
I think Michigan State's going to win this game outright. So give me Michigan State plus the points here.
And you had UConn, remember, as your regional winner, so you're going to go against it.
But the way they've been playing,
they're not playing great.
Michigan State has been heating up, and UConn's been kind of cooling off a little bit. These paths are now going to converge. Give me Michigan State plus the points. Silas Demery's not at 100%. He did play on Sunday, but he's not 100%. So give me Michigan State plus 2.5. I'm going to give Izzo to get back to the Elite 8 this March.
Yeah, when I initially filled out my bracket, my Elite 8 matchup was Duke and Michigan State. For obvious persons.
Mine was Johnny's UConn, actually.
Johnny's UConn. Well, I mean, that would obviously be I think that's what everyone wants at this point.
I don't want it, to be honest.
I know you don't want it. I'm saying people in the basketball realm want a fourth matchup with this team. Even Dan Hurley wants it at this point.
That's as
Not no,
toxic as
no
UNC Duke in the tournament
Yeah,
a
it's
couple of years ago.
Yeah. The what was that? That was a Final Four game, right? Not a national championship.
Yes,
No, it was Final
game.
Four because that's right. Because I brought up the UNC Kansas game earlier. That was the national championship that year. That was Coach K's last game. Yeah. I'll go with Michigan State though to cover the 2.5. I do think they win this game outright. I think Carr is just one of the better players in the country. Obviously, he's had some issues with his I don't know why I say anger management, but it was what's the word I'm looking for?
He runs hot. Let's just say he runs hot.
Yeah, people kind of compare him to Grayson Allen in a way. I guess that's maybe the best way to explain it, but nowhere near close to that. I have Michigan State winning this game. I'll take them to cover the 2.5, though. This should be a really fun matchup. Izzo and Hurley. I mean, the East region, like we knew going into this tournament, was going to be incredible for the coaching matchups. And this is exactly what the NCAA tournament got. The final 4 teams in this region are the 4 teams that they wanted, realistically. So give me Michigan State 2.5. And then what do we have for the final matchup? Did I do the last game or did you do the last game? I'm already off track.
I'm going to just recap it, Nick. We got number 6 Tennessee versus number 2 Iowa State. Iowa State is a 4.5 point favorite. 138.5 is the over-under. And Iowa State playing as the number 1 team in the country. -4.5, that's an easy one for them.
Yeah, I'm on Iowa State too. I know Jefferson's injured. I think that will play a factor still for this team, but I just don't see. I don't see right now how you can pick against them right now at this point. Tennessee, yes, got a big upset if you want to call it that against Virginia, but this team is Iowa State just playing one of one of the best teams in the country right now. I have them going to the Elite Eight against Michigan in their region. I'm still going with that in this region. I'll take Iowa State -4.5 in that matchup as well against the Volunteers. So that'll wrap up our mushing hour for the Sweet 16. Our next mushing hour, Johnson, will be the second to last one of the season. We'll be previewing the Final Four after the Elite Eight matchups have concluded this upcoming weekend. So should be a very interesting week. Any final thoughts you have before we wrap this one up? Friday night's going to be a very interesting one for you and I.
No final thoughts, Nick. I'm excited to see some college basketball on Friday with my team this late in the season. I haven't had this ever.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna cherish this, but take us home.
I also forgot to mention, by the way, for the Arkansas-Arizona matchup, that's our 2 regional winners you and I have for the West. So
yeah, I mentioned even though Arkansas, I picked them in the regional. I'm gonna rock with Arizona because of the analytics.
Yeah, that should be we'll see. Right, as of right now, our final 4 teams are still all in play.
We did a pretty good job.
Yeah, not bad so far.
We didn't fall into any of the traps, so that's good.
Yeah, you got an extra upset over me with the Texas and NC State matchup and the VCU.
And my one Cinderella VCU almost did it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, Troy was not even remotely close. I should have just stuck with High Point as the team, but I wasn't even confident. I said High Point could win that game. I just liked Wisconsin a lot going into this tournament, but that's what I get for it, I guess. At least I picked it, I guess, as my upset. But yeah, my Cinderella pick lost by 29 points. Not ideal. Not ideal. But yeah, great tournament so far. I don't even care if it's a chalk tournament again. It's just been
9-6-11. 3 teams. 9-6-11. I don't care what you want to call about. That's not a chalk tournament. Those are some
That's fair.
Seeds that are not supposed to be here by any means necessary.
That's fair. Who would have thought Texas and Iowa? Vanderbilt, you could have not Vanderbilt. Sorry, Tennessee. You could have talked me into maybe getting here. No shot. Texas and Iowa. You could have talked. Me
Absolutely not.
Yeah, no shot. I agree 100%. But let's take this one home, Johnson. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We started with 68 teams. We are now down to the final 16 teams in this year's NCAA tournament. We start on Thursday with a couple of matchups where we have Texas and Purdue, Iowa, Nebraska, Arkansas, Arizona, Illinois, and Houston. The Sweet 16 then will conclude on Friday. St. John's, Duke, Bama, Michigan, Michigan State, and UConn, and then Tennessee and Iowa State. After the Sweet 16 wraps up, and then goes into the Elite Eight on Saturday and Sunday. Johnson and I will be back next week here on the show to recap the Sweet 16, recap the Elite Eight, and then preview this year's Final Four in the NCAA tournament. For Nicholas Pavone and Andrew Johnson, this has been the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.